Hello again. In this video, we will learn a special construction that is made with the transitive verb plus object complement. We have already talked about the transitive verb, that it cannot make the full sense without the object. And if you are interested to know more about the transitive verb, please watch my video on transitive verb. But now, let's learn this special structure. The common verbs which are used in this construction are name, keep, elect, make, find, paint, call, consider, think, and choose. There are many other verbs which are used in this construction. If you want to know more about them, please refer some best English to English dictionary. The formation is made in this way, that first of all we put subject, after that we use verb, then we use object, and finally we use complement. These are some facts we have to keep in our mind while using these verbs or this structure, that you cannot make this structure with all the transitive verbs. There is a specific group of them which are made or written in this way. The complement which is used in this construction renames or describes the object. Therefore, it is called the object complement. I'm over stressing on this particular point, object complement, because we have also learned simply the term complement in our sentence parts. But there I talked about the complement, which is the complement of the verb. This complement is the complement of object. It does not complete the meaning of the verb, but it tells extra information about the object. For making things easy, I have changed the colors of the words like verb in red, object in green, and complement in blue. The first example is his parents named him Kim. Here, Kim is the complement and it tells us something more about him. So we will say it is object complement, not the complement of the verb. They elected her president. Here, president tells us something more about her. So it is object complement. He kept me busy. Here, busy is the complement and tells us something more about me. They made me captain. Captain tells something about me. And the jury found him guilty. Guilty tells us something more about him. Likewise, in the sentences, the words white, liar, trustworthy, rascal, and leader, they tell us something more about the objects like wall, him, man, and in 9th sentence him, and in the last sentence also about him. So once again, I'm over stressing that this is not the complement of the verb, this is the complement of the object, and this is special structure. There are some points we need to note. That is, if we remove the complement, two different things happen. One, either the sentence becomes incomplete or the meaning of the verb changes. Let us understand this through the examples. Let's compare these three sentences. I consider the man. In this sentence, I have subject I, consider is the man verb, the man is object. Apparently, the sentence seems to be complete, but it has incomplete sense because the verb here consider needs complement to define the word man. So this is incomplete. As I earlier told you, in some cases, the meaning becomes incomplete. In other cases, the meaning changes. For example, in the sentence, I found the book, here found gives the meaning of that I located the book. Means I found out or I located where the book was. But in the second sentence, when I say I found the book interesting, the sentence until the word book is same, only adding the complement interesting, which is the complement of the book, the meaning of the whole sentence changes. Here, this sentence shows my opinion about the book. But in the first sentence, the verb found shows that I located the book. So, if you remove in some cases the complement, the sentence gives incomplete meaning, and in other cases, it changes the whole sense of the sentence. The other problem that is faced by new learners, that is to mix up the two terms, that is object complement and indirect object. As I have already talked about, that object complement describes or renames the direct object, and mostly the object complement is either noun or adjective. As in the case, Alina made me angry, here object complement is angry, and it is adjective in parts of speech and tells something more about me. Indirect object is quite different thing. That is, first thing is adjective cannot be the indirect object. This is the very basic thing to understand whether the last word is object complement or indirect object. Secondly, the indirect object identifies the recipient of the or the beneficiary of the direct object. Means in this construction we have two objects, direct object and indirect object. So the direct object is received, taken in possession of by the indirect object. That means, in other words, if I say that here indirect objects receives something, takes in possession something. Let's have a look at this statement. The same sentence, now I am changing the word angry with the word cake. Alina made me a cake. Here, me is indirect object. I have already written it in bold. A cake is direct object. Now, if you understand the meaning of this sentence, that who received the cake? I. As I have already said that indirect object is the recipient or a beneficiary of the direct object. Direct object is cake, and me, that means I, am the beneficiary or recipient of the cake. This is the thing, and this does not happen with the object complement. Object complement redefines, describes, renames the object. Let's have a look at a second example. She gave him a gift. Him is indirect object. A gift is a direct object. And she gave the gift. If I ask who received the gift, the answer is him. So him is indirect object. We can't say it is complement of object or something. It receives something. It does not tell us something more about the direct object. Let's have a look at some key points to further understand this confusion or to clarify this confusion. Point number one is object complement usually comes after the direct object. Usually, I don't say always. There are some constructions where we can change, but mostly the object complement comes after the direct object. Second, object complement appears with specific transitive verbs. Please, this is very important. Transitive verb. When the object, if I have a look at usually comes after the direct object, but if the complement is used as an adjective before the object, so that is another scenario. But usually it comes after the direct object, and it is used with the specific, not all, specific transitive verbs. And the last point is very important. It is that the object complement cannot become the subject of the sentence when we change the sentence into passive voice. These three things in mind, let's have a look at this sentence. The committee appointed Javed team leader. Here, team leader is a noun. And if I try to make this sentence passive, I can't make the team leader, which is the complement, as the subject of the sentence. This is the first restriction in this construction. Second thing about, or I'm going to say the second point that is related to indirect object is that usually the indirect object comes before the direct object. Complement comes after the direct object, and indirect object usually comes before the object. But there are some constructions in which we have to use prepositions like to and for, etc. Then we can change the situation. And then the second point about the indirect object is that it appears with ditransitive verbs. And if you want to know more about the ditransitive verbs, do watch my video on that particular point. The last point is very important. It is that indirect object can become the subject in passive voice. The object complement cannot be the subject, but indirect object can become the subject of sentence in passive voice. Let's have a look at some examples. She made him a sandwich. Here, him is indirect object and a sandwich is a direct object. I can also change. Earlier I said usually the indirect object comes before. Here I have used indirect object him before the direct object, that is a sandwich. But I can also change the places of these two parts of sentence, like direct and indirect object. As she made sandwich for him. Now I brought the indirect object in the end, but then I also added another word, that is for. So this is another thing, and this does not happen with the object complement. And if I want to change this sentence into passive voice, I can change it and I can make the indirect object as the subject of the sentence, like he, and here him is the indirect object, and I'm changing the sentence into passive voice. He was made a sandwich by her, and this does not happen with the object complement. And this is the very solid and important point to distinguish between the indirect object and the object complement. I hope you learned all about the object complement and finally the difference between the object complement and indirect object. If you have any confusion, please do ask me. And until my next video, bye bye.